government of New Brunswick have told their employees, MB government employees, just to clarify, not to all employees, that they cannot say or acknowledge indigenous titles. So that means indigenous lands, but they won't face repercussions. The staff was told to instead use approved acknowledgement that excludes words like unceded and unsurrendered. Um, they say it's because of a lawsuit and legal rights, but I mean, I just did this because we had the article, and I Google New Brunswick government indigenous rights, and the amount of articles that Blaine Higgs appears doing some racist shit to indigenous people is like seven of them, one after another one. So I mean, can't this guy just say that he doesn't like indigenous people? Is that he just needs to say it? Clinton, what's your thought on it?
I think if he said it, he would have had a majority government a lot quicker back over here in New Brunswick. That's for sure. What? No, I'm saying like you would have had the support of like the majority of New Brunswickers.
No, it's a good take. It's just it was a hot take, a good take, but a hot take. That's why I made the face that I made.
Gotcha. I wasn't sure. Like, so well, last time with the Truth and Reconciliation holiday, I had some unpopular opinions. Like, this is Higgs going right back to classic ridiculousness. I know words are important and words matter, but to literally at this point in time, just like send out a memo to every government New Brunswick employee, and to be honest, honestly, not thinking it's going to get leaked by anyone, saying that you can't even use this kind of terminology. It's just so ridiculous. It's just another slap in the face. I think I can understand it from a legal perspective, whereas First Nations communities are trying to make claims on 60% of the land in New Brunswick. So at the same time, the government's saying like, well, we can no longer acknowledge that we took it from you without your approval because that may weaken our case in court. It's just racism. It's just more racism. I couldn't believe it.
Hillary, what's your take on it?
I think that the worst part about all of this is the fact that teachers are government of New Brunswick employees. And so I've had a lot of teacher friends sort of saying, how do you want us to fairly recount history when you are trying to ask us to reword land acknowledgements to blur the truth of the history? And only like 2 weeks after Truth and Reconciliation Day, which he didn't even enshrine again. Really, if it all was right, Blaine, just tell the indigenous people you're racist and you don't like them, because the evidence is stacking up pretty high at this point. I mean, I think it's great in a way, I guess, that there's not going to be repercussions so that everyone can continue to do what they're doing. So it only does really look bad on the government. It also looks bad on the government for going into a lawsuit against these people, because the history is the history. You took this land a long time ago. I know Blaine is old. I don't think he was literally there stealing the land, but at the same time, he is best friends with the group of assholes that are continuing to keep the land and the money away from people who deserve it.
He might have been there stealing the land. We can't be sure. I mean,
we can't be sure. He's only giving people 5 extra cents. He might be there. He might have been there. It's hard to say, but I didn't think so.
Well, he worked for Airbnb, so you never
that's
know.
What I mean. Yeah.
Now, I want to ask a question. Now, we've seen all these microaggressions that the government of New Brunswick have been doing to indigenous people. Do you guys think it's, because for me, I think it's a stereotype. Blaine Higgs is the stereotype man of New Brunswick, old white, that is old school, and this back in the day they didn't respect indigenous people. Do you think he is implementing that thinking into the government, or do you think it's just part of what New Brunswick is?
I think it's what New Brunswick is. I don't think that like Blaine is not the only one. Like the joke that isn't really a joke that Clinton said, he might have gotten a majority vote sooner. I like I grew up around people who also harbored those stereotypes that Indigenous people were just drunks who took the money from the government, and I'm only 27, so it's not like it's this ideology of only this 60-70 year old man who's best friends with the Irvings. I think it is the mentality of a lot of people, and I think it's really unfortunate. I've heard several of my friends talk about the different ways in which their places of employment in New Brunswick did not celebrate Truth and Reconciliation Day the way that they feel that they should have, and like not even just having a day off, but didn't properly acknowledge it, didn't say a statement, didn't have a moment of silence, just operated like it was a business as usual day. And a lot of these people who are like woke-ish mid 20-year-olds felt like that was a really big missed opportunity. So if that's happening in a lot of different places across New Brunswick, it can't only be Blaine thinking this way. So I don't think that he's necessarily like polluting the government with these thoughts. I think there's probably a lot of racist people in the government who are supporting what he's doing in this mistreatment of an entire group of people. And I will also say, all of these microaggressions are really stacking up to one big macroaggression called genocide. It's not micro anymore if you keep adding on to the list.
I just want to say that I hate the term microaggression, because for any listeners out there that aren't aware, the term microaggression only applies to when someone is saying something offensive to a visible minority or person of color. So it was a term that was literally created just to dilute racism. There's no microaggressions, there's only aggressions, in my opinion. We need to get rid of the microaggression. I say that all the time.
I mean, to be honest with you, I agree on that. I just think like in the government perspective, because again, my concern is that I think, and this is a personal opinion, I could be totally wrong about this. I think Blaine Higgs and his cabinet of old white men are putting all of these things that they believe, that they always believe, and they're implementing it into the government. But they are aware that they cannot do it like they would do it. They do like little poking things, and they blame
Absolutely.
it on like budgets and things like that. And I'm like, okay, so they they find a reason of doing, like, for example, like the fact that he didn't recognize systemic racism as a law. Like, that's stupid. Like, that you could have done that. That would have been an easy thing to do, but you decided not to do it because of oh, you said that that would be hard, that whatever. Like, you found a little thing, and then you take the truth and reconciliation, saying that, oh, businesses, then you take them their gas tax, saying, oh, it's too much money. Like, it's little things. When I say, because I say it's like little things that you can find loopholes in the government, and you could justify them because some people will be, that will benefit some people along the line, because that's what governments are. Like, they benefit some people and some people lose. That's
Oh
usually
yeah.
how it works. And I feel like they are doing like little pokings, that's what I call the macro. It's like little pokings to when they just can take everything away and say, oh, fuck you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that you're saying microaggressions and you're saying something wrong. That's what the term has always been. But it's racism, or it's aggression, or it's systemic. Microaggression is the term they created to just allow them to do it and downplay it by being like, oh, it's just a microaggression. But regarding your question, Fidel, like, is it Blaine Higgs being an old guy with these opinions, or New Brunswick? It's hard to separate the two. It's kind of all one and the same, right? It's like, the Irvings picked him and put him in power because he was a certain way, and people voted him in because he was a certain way. It's like Donald Trump. Donald Trump didn't create the racism in the States, but he gave a face and a voice to it, and enabled people to come out of the I was going to say come out of the closet with their racism. Yeah, Blaine Higgs he's the perfect token child for an older generation. And Hillary, I gotta admit, like, when I was before my teen years, I heard those same negative things about Indigenous people too, even growing up in Toronto, because actually it's one of the cultures that it wasn't really present in Toronto. I always say it was the most multicultural city in the world. And it wasn't until my teen years that I very quickly changed my opinions. So, there's still no excuse in 2021 for any age group, demographic, or anything like that to be racist. The last thing I want to say on the topic, though, if we end up moving on, is that it's really interesting, the Indigenous plight and struggle, because I don't know of any other culture in anywhere in the world where after their land was stolen from them, they had the opportunity to like argue for it and demand it back and seek reconciliation through diplomatic means, and just to be given it back. Even the indigenous people seem to, even the Palestinians, right? Like their land was taken from them, and in the genocidal fashion as well. I'm just always mystified that in Canada they even allow indigenous people to. It's amazing that we live in a country where they allow indigenous people to file a lawsuit to make a land claim on land that was taken from them 300 years ago. That's amazing. I wonder what's going to happen.
Don't let don't let Blaine Higgs get that snippet where he's like, we're so nice, we're letting there be a lawsuit. Canada's such a good country, we're allowing them to fight for what they originally had.
But I will
get
say,
your point. But
You're right.
but we're not the only one. Like we're not the only ones. Australia, that has happened. New Zealand, that has happened. The United States, that has happened. The same thing has happened in different countries with indigenous people. In Mexico, that has happened too. Yeah, and in the Middle East, that's their life. That's their life. Except that they don't believe in the system; they just fight. Go ahead.
Are you saying that indigenous people in the States fought for their land back? Who won? No one won. They didn't win.
Well, no,
they win.
They actually have better. They're not better, but they're better than in Canada. Because in Canada, in the States, they were able to establish free markets in their land. So, for example, they're able to get casinos and coal mining and oil fields and stuff like that, and they don't have to give a cent to the government. That's theirs, and they share within their tribe, and they can do lending. They do a lot of phone lending and a lot of banking, like telephone banking, which they cannot do that in Canada.
That's also who's left, though. Oh, I didn't mean to cut off your last thought, because most of the indigenous people in the United States have been eradicated. There's something like 4 or 5 times the amount of indigenous people in Canada than the States. But sorry, finish your thought.
No. Yeah, they might. I don't know the population statistics, but they have fought. In the United States, they have fought and won several times. Different things like free markets and stuff like that. Now, compared to Canada, because our laws are different, they've been more harassed here than in the States. But it's not the first country. There's been many countries. I think in the States, it's been the one that they have thrived most. Because they have a capitalism society, right? So because of that type of society that they have, they've been able to gain a lot of things. Like, for example, I don't know if you guys remember that when the pandemic came, the UFC was the first sport to come back, professional sport to come back, and they wanted to do a stadium, like a live thing. So Dana White was going to do it in indigenous land in the States, and that was completely legal. It wasn't until ABC, which is the parent company of ESPN, told them, hold on, dude, you can't do this. But they were able to do it, and nobody could do anything about it.
I just wanted to say that I Googled the amount of people, and there's like 5 million more indigenous people in America than here.
Okay.
For the record, I
looked this up in the past for a previous episode. Okay. Go ahead.
It said 6.79 million Native American people in the States, and we only have 1.67 million here. Granted, our population is much smaller than America as a whole. But I've always heard a lot of people, even American people, saying that they don't believe that they have indigenous people anymore. And I've seen indigenous creators basically say that it's like a myth and a misconception that they are not in that country. And that's like the hardest thing they have to face, is this feeling of like erasure, like they don't exist at all. Where it's like, in the States, it's almost like they don't exist. In Canada, they exist, and we make them suffer and beg for their land. And then we say we change land acknowledgements and don't enshrine their holidays and blah, blah, blah.
I think that's the difference in the States. I think because in the States, they have been able to gain more access. That the only way that they can do more racism stuff to them is by erasing them. I agree with Hillary. I think that's what they do. Because it's so decentralized, like what the law in North Dakota is, it's not the same one in Florida, and you can go to the Supreme Court and stuff like that, which we have that in Canada, kind of similar. but it's a little bit more centralized than in the States. But how the States does it is that they don't talk about them, they don't say anything, they don't even acknowledge it, and they have taken away a lot of their federal things because of they have been able to gain as much as they gain. The federal government takes a lot to them. So I think that's I think I agree with Hillary in that part.
Uh, you're right. You're right. It was the percentages I was quoting last time. There's it's about like 0 point, I don't know the stats. Like anyways, percentage per population ratio per capita is
I think we're more when it comes to indigenous people, I think we're more compared to indigenous in New Zealand and Australia because we have kind of like not the same population. I think we have Australia has more people than us and New Zealand has less. But I think it's a more comparable because it comes from the British law compared to the Americans that they have their own thing going on. So, but anyways, Blaine Higgs hates indigenous people. He won't admit it. He won't.
Kanye, it's a Kanye comment of New Brunswick.
Yeah, I mean,
Blaine Higgs doesn't care about indigenous people.
He doesn't. He doesn't care. He doesn't give a.
He doesn't care about black people either.
Well, because again, the difference between us is that in a little way, they need us. They need the immigrants from Africa. They need the black and brown people to work to pay taxes. Like they need us. The indigenous don't have to pay taxes, or well, not necessarily, but they don't have to pay taxes directly. They do pay some taxes, but they don't.
We're not immigrants, but
yeah. Well, no. But when I'm saying black people. But when I'm saying black people in general, they need black people. They need people to come. They need butts and seats. The indigenous is kind of weird because it's like, well, we took the land away from you. We're making you live in a shithole. We're taking all this shit away from you. And guess what? We don't like you, but we took our shit. We took your shit. So it's like, it is a little bit strange to somebody that's just the color of their skin. And like you guys, you were born and raised here, right? Like it's just that you just have a different skin tone than somebody else, right? So
in the argument, sorry, I was just going to say very quickly, in the argument that Blaine also doesn't like the indigenous, don't forget that he also tried to almost make them start to pay taxes again and take away their tax exemption. So,
and he ignored decades of their requests for an inquiry into systemic racism and instead handpicked their own person to put their token commissioner to look into racism in general. Like they said, you guys want to do this? Nah, fuck that. We're going to do this different thing on our own and completely ignore everything that you think would help this province.
I feel mild PTSD when I start to hear Commissioner against systemic racism now, because it was such a long few months without that hiring, during that hiring process, that like Soraya was discussing how long it took in the guise of this whole conversation about the unceded land and all the wrongdoings New Brunswick has done and how they didn't really stand with the indigenous people during the whole fisheries terrorism thing in Nova Scotia. And anyway, as soon as she was like, so what was that information about the commissioner against systemic racism? I was like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm tired now.
Well, it has happened. Shout out to Manju. Hope she does her job. I mean, I don't think nothing's going to come out of it, but at least she's going to do her job.